audience coming up as well. So it's a great honor. And I genuinely feel really, really, really blessed. I don't know why today feels like one of those days where you can really feel like you're involved with something bigger than just Ramadan by yourself, especially during the times we're in right now as well. So I just want to take a moment to really appreciate, it's been a really good first 3 days, and I hope it's been really good for everyone else as well. So just a bit of housekeeping as we go forward. So for those that might not have experienced and joined before, you have a couple of options at the bottom in the reactions area. We really encourage everyone to be able to put their videos on. We want this to be really interactive. We want this to be able to be enjoyable for everyone. So at the bottom, you can see a reactions button. In that, you'll find a couple of different options, clap, thumbs up, and even I think you can raise your hand as well. As this is very interactive, raise your hands. If you have any questions at any point, if you want to be able to get involved, or if you want to be able to raise a question or whatever, I really encourage this. So without further ado, I will go and start the agenda. So the agenda for today really is a 5-minute introduction, as we have, into Ramadan Tent Project. And really, I mean, for those that don't know, we're a non-profit organization founded in 2013 with a mission to bring communities together and better understand one another. We empower individuals and facilitate dialogue, raising awareness for important social issues and work towards a more cohesive society. This right here is our flagship event, the Open Iftar, and it's the largest community event in Ramadan. Invites Muslims and people of all faith, culture backgrounds, age, to explore Islamic faith and share the Ramadan spirit through food, inspirational talks, and engaging discussion. So far, we've fed over 100,000 people, hosted locations all over the UK, including the Southwark Cathedral, Wembley Stadium, the British Library, and for those that were lucky enough a couple of years ago, Trafalgar Square as well. We also have many other projects that we do, and we really encourage everyone to be able to get involved with these as well. More specifically, a few leadership programs, but at the moment we're doing Ramadan Lates, which you can find out on our website. And we also have a lot of different products as well. So my Open Iftar pack you can find online. Right, so enough of the intro. The event and the plan for today. Like I mentioned earlier, we have got 3 guests today, and the topic that we mentioned online is diversity in sports. So we'll get into this a little bit later on. That will start in about let's say about 5 to 6 minutes, 7:15. We'll have about 20 minutes of engagement with the speakers, followed by a question and answer section, and then a final thoughts and reflection 5 minutes before Azan. Today the Azan, I believe, is at 8 o'clock, so we'll try and wrap up just before that as well. Right, so just before we get into anything else, I want to be able to see who is actually joined and where from. Feel free to message. You can directly message in the group chat at the bottom. Equally, like I said, you can raise your hands as well. And it'd be really nice to see where everyone's from and what everyone's doing and how they're finding Ramadan so far. Anyone would like to go first? Good old London. Good old London. How many people from London? You can raise your hand virtually, or I can see Sam, I can see Riz is also from London. And Joanna, Kevin as well. Nice, okay, quite a few. And who is international? We've seen a lot of international people. In my experience, I think I've seen Australia. Time difference is crazy. There's a real dedication. We have Huda from Sweden. Nice, okay. Huda, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, sure. So I just kind of live in like an hour off of Stockholm. I'm usually from London, but I moved there for lockdown. And Ramadan's a little bit longer, but it's not too bad so far.
Okay. How is it? But isn't it, you have a lot longer days than the UK?
So like Fajr comes in at like 2 something, and then we break our fast in like a few minutes now. So it's a little, I think it's like an hour longer than the UK. It's not too bad.
Wow, okay. So you're gonna have to jump off in a minute.
Yeah, basically.
No, nice. No, very, very cool. And how did you hear about Ramadan Tent Project, and how's the experience been so far? How did you get involved just before you have to sort of jump off as well?
So when I used to live in London, I just attended an event and then I decided to join voluntary. So yeah, I think I heard from it from social media or something, but it was a few years ago.
A few years ago, before the whole virtual open Iftar happened, right?
Yeah, it was a real one.
That's awesome. And just final question: what's for Iftar?
Pasta, I think.
Pasta.
Keep it simple.
Carbs. Got to keep them up. Yeah, awesome. That's really cool to hear. Thank you very much. As I explained, and that's similar to my journey as well. I came across Open Iftar, I think the final year before it went virtual. Open Iftar 2019. Saw it online, saw the ribbons, came along, exceptional. Thought, really good event, being able to integrate a lot of different people. And I just had to get involved. And the year after was how I got involved with this. And I'd really recommend more and more people to sort of get involved with this as well. There's lots of different examples of how people can not only engage with society, but also benefit from various different speakers and events as well. Okay, anyone else? Fish and vegetables, I see from Shabana. Fish and vegetables. I did say earlier, like I felt really grateful. It could have been because of Ramadan. It was actually because I know what I'm in for Iftar today. It's fish fingers. Love fish fingers. So I'm pretty buzzing about that. Right. Well, if that's all, then let's get into the talk itself. So we have three speakers, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to give a brief introduction into all three. So we have Kevin Coleman, first and foremost, and he is the head of equality, diversity, and inclusion. We have Salma Mahamud from Brentford's Women's Development Team, and we also have Riz Rehman, who is the Professional Footballers Association, so the PFA, the education advisor. I believe he's also the chair of Surrey's FA's Inclusion Advisory Group. I'm just going to unmute and welcome all three to the stage. Welcome everyone. Hello, how are you doing? Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, well, I can hear you, Adnan, yeah.
Very well, very good. And I'm going to ask to unmute Salma as well. Sorry, 1 second, Salma. Can you hear us, Salma?
Yeah, I can hear you all right.
Awesome. Okay, amazing. I gave a brief introduction as I promised, but beforehand we said we'll divide up the time sort of 5 minutes each. And we're going to be able to sort of discuss, diversity in sports and what that really means to you, your experiences so far, and just really share some stories around, what kind of things everyone else can get involved with as well. So I guess to begin with, should we start off with Riz Rehman? You're the first on my screen.
Yeah, so I actually work for the PFA, so I'm the Player Inclusion Executive. So I've recently just changed roles as well, but just going back how I sort of started, I actually started my career at Brentford actually back in '94. So I was a player there as a 14-year-old, got my scholarship, then I broke my leg. I was a first year pro there, and I think at the time when I think about it now, I was possibly one of the first Pakistani Muslims to play for the club. So to be part of it at the time, there was probably another 3 Asian players. So, and now how, when I look at the game now and how it's progressed, you're seeing a lot more diversity in football and sport generally, I think. Working in the industry, I think a lot of the conversations and a lot of the things you see on social media, there's so much negativity around it. But me as a person and the work I do, I try to ensure that I try and keep the conversation positive. A lot of people talk to me and ask me about my journey, how I got to where I am with the PFA. Again, bringing the sort of only South Asian Muslim working for the organisation, and I think a lot of it comes down to, as a young person, doing volunteering your time, making connections, networking with people, but more importantly, not just networking, but staying in touch with people as well. Embracing other people's cultures, religions, faiths, and also giving the time to actually understand their beliefs, their cultures, why they celebrate or do certain practices. So as a person growing up, my dad's always ensured as a family we've done that, and I think that sort of helped me in my career to date as well. At the PFA, my role involves a lot around that underrepresentation of young players from underrepresented groups, so more specifically South Asian groups, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Indian. But more recently, what I've seen in my work is a growing number of young Muslim players and their families within the academy system. Now, the academies is where players coming from the age of 9, really start their career in football. And it's a long journey, from 9 to 17. That's another nearly 10 years, 8 years until you get professional contracts. So my work recently has been working with clubs and raising awareness of that Muslim player. How can clubs understand what Muslim families, parents, some of the differences, whether it's prayer facilities, whether it's halal food, just how can we embrace that? Because if you look at football, a lot of the players in the Premier League who are Muslim come from overseas. They're foreign imports from around the world, and again, it's embracing that. But what are we doing for young Muslim players in the system here now to ensure that they're included, to ensure that they're embraced? And it's been very positive. I had a phone call yesterday actually from a parent from a club in London. Actually, I did a workshop to them, and the dad called me saying, Riz, the club actually approached me last week about Ramadan. What they've said to me is when it's time to break the fast, they're going to stop the session, let his son open his fast, and on the way home as well, pack some food for the family, which I think it's great. And that really helps empower the player, the parent as well. And it raises awareness across the clubs. So on the workshops, it wasn't just the coaches on the calls, but it was people across the club as well. So that's some a little bit of insight into my work that I'm doing at the PFA, and I've worked closely with Kev actually while his time at the FA as well. So yeah, that's what I'm passionate about, really raising that awareness. And I think football is open. Football, welcomes people from all backgrounds, all communities. Yes, we need to see more diversity off the pitch in terms of different positions. But when we talk about diversity, I believe, again, the focus is always on ethnicity. But if we look at the wider different characteristics, we need to ensure we're embracing people from all backgrounds, all disabilities, wherever they're any background or disability they have, ensure that we embrace them and bring them into the game. You don't see many. I'll give you another example, another story quickly before I'll pass on. For example, Crystal Palace, I do a lot of great work with them. They've recently appointed a couple of Muslim staff, and whose job is to go out in the community and to engage with the diverse Muslim community of Croydon. Get them involved into sport, football, health and fitness. And next week, they're actually starting their first Ramadan football sessions. And it's not just for the Muslim community, but it's for the wider community as well. So I think football's come a long way. There's a lot more to do, I believe. But, we're making the right sort of right steps forward. And it's a conversation I think we'll keep having. But we don't just want conversations. We need action. We need people getting involved, young people coming in, volunteering their time and ensuring that it moves forward. I believe it is moving forward. Yes, maybe a bit slow at times, but there's some great work happening, and that's what we need. We need to ensure we highlight the great work, we highlight the role models like we're doing today, working behind the scenes and playing football like Salma. I've not come across many Muslim footballers in England. One of my jobs is to find out who they are. So it's great to connect with Salma, and she's a brilliant role model, I believe, for younger generations, not just females, but young male players and their families, to see that it can be done.
Great, that's really good. And to be fair, there's a lot of interesting points you've raised here as well. I've written them down. I'm going to come back to them a little bit later on. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Kevin next, followed by Salma afterwards.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So what I was going to talk about is equality, diversity and inclusion related to sport. So when we talk about the EDI, and I'm going to sort of chart it along with my history in the game. So like Riz, I've worked in football for quite a long time. And the work that we do is split into 3 areas. So I used to work at Kick It Out, and they demonstrate equality. They campaign for equality. They campaign to have sport which tries to offer equal access to people from all backgrounds. But they're just campaigning. And then I moved to the FA, and the FA is the governing body, and the FA are trying to demonstrate equality and diversity. So they're looking at how diverse the game is, and at the same time trying to change the policies and the processes so there's equal access for everyone to get involved. But they haven't quite cracked it yet. And now finally I'm at Brentford Football Club, who are really ambitious and who want to get that last step of inclusion. So recognizing the diversity of the game, trying to make sure everything we do is accessible and equal to everyone. But then the final step is making it inclusive, making sure that everyone's included within that sport. I think it's really important. One of the things before I came on, I spoke to Salah about is why sport, why is sport so important for equality and diversity? And it's important because it's such a global language. If you go to any country in the world, if you speak to anyone from any background, almost everyone will have an interest in sport. It's a global language. It's something which breaks down barriers. If you're good at sport, it doesn't matter where you're from, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're educated or not. It brings people together, and it's a leveler. And all of the privileges that people are often born with, and all the disadvantage or advantage that people are born with, once they're on the sports field, a lot of those things are forgotten, and people see each other as human beings. And there's loads of examples. And I think if you can look at lots of examples of where governments, for example, have tried lots of interventions to try and solve social problems, but they'll often resort to sport because they know that can work where other things can't. So I wrote down a few examples as we were listening. So there are examples of where footballers worked in prisons to help people rehabilitate and then get back into work. Football's been used to divert young people away from crime. Politically, football's been used in Northern Ireland. And we're involved in a project in Palestine where young Israelis and Palestinians play football together, because that was the only thing they probably would have done together. And even closer to home, looking at Ramadan last year in Birmingham, we delivered a Ramadan Football League. So after Iftari, after Tarawih, there's a football league at midnight, which stopped some of the young people, walking around the streets, brought them together, Muslims and non-Muslims, to play football together, doing something wholesome and healthy, and then going back home after. So I guess my real message is that football can do things, and sport in general can bring people together in a way that other things can't. And it's a really potent and important aspect of life that everyone in the country should spend more time on.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for your words. And I'll pass it on to Salma as well. Just before I do that as well, as always, people in the audience listening and those that want to be able to ask questions, you can post them directly in the chat below. Equally, if you don't want to be able to put it in the group, you can also just message me separately as well. There's a function in Zoom that allows you to do that as well. So keep the questions coming. There'll be a question and answer section after this as well. Thank you. So Salma, sorry, I'll pass it on to you now.
Hi. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay. So which is a very diverse city, and I was quite lucky to be born here and to grow up here, because there's a lot of people that I could relate to. There was a lot of Black people, a lot of Muslims, and a lot of Somalis. So I never felt like I was excluded. I never felt like I was out of place, both in school and out. There was a lot of times where I would speak to my cousins like abroad, specifically one of my cousins who's based in Italy, and she would tell me how she was the only Muslim in her school, like the only Black girl in her school, and how that made her feel. So she was like incredibly surprised when she came here, and she asked me how many Muslim people and how many Somali people went to my school, and I said I couldn't tell you because there's just so many people. So she was really surprised, and that sort of highlighted to me how lucky I was. But then I also realized how, despite being in such a diverse city, when it came to football, I did feel out of place. I did feel like I was the only one. There were times where I felt really uncomfortable. There's not a lot of Muslim females that participate in sports or in football for a lot of reasons. And that, like me growing up, witnessing that just made me feel like there was a lot of times where I felt like I wanted to drop out and not continue playing, and not continue being involved in sports. And so I've sort of, growing up, I've sort of had to look at the reasons why that is the case, and why there isn't as many Muslim females and as many involved in football and in sport. And a few of the reasons I've found was because parents of Muslim females think that with them being involved in sports and being involved in football, that they have to sacrifice their religion a lot of the time. And I know my parents did. So I had difficulties growing up trying to play football, with my parents not wanting me to play because they felt like I was going to sacrifice my religion, or that I would be sacrificing my education. And like, because I was playing football, I would completely stop focusing on my education. And that was something that I had to, you know, convince them and make sure I had good grades growing up, and I was going to sixth form. I'm now studying at uni. And as I sort of grew up and they could see that I was still pursuing my education whilst playing football, that's when they sort of became a bit more open and accepting of me playing sports. And so growing up, I knew how much it meant to me, seeing, even like if I saw someone on the opposite team that was a Muslim female, I would get like really excited and like really happy. And one of the ways that I thought I could do something about it was by coaching, so getting involved in coaching. And so I did my FA level 1, and I started coaching under 12 girls team, and now I'm coaching at Perform Soccer School, which is a new club for girls. And that's sort of my way of trying to inspire younger Muslim females to get into sports. If they can see me doing it and me doing well in it, then they'll see that there is an opportunity for them, and that there is a place both within sport, within football, playing wise, and coaching, and that they aren't an outsider. And then I also won the BBC Young Reporters competition, and I entered that competition to sort of highlight the difficulties and the discrimination that people can face. And I myself, when I was 12 years old, was racially abused by the opposing team's fans. And so I sort of used my story and my journey through football to sort of highlight the difficulties faced, and try and inspire younger females, and particularly younger Muslim females, to get involved in football, and sort of use that as a platform, which is obviously the BBC is a huge platform. And I know with them seeing a Muslim female on a platform as big as the BBC playing football and talking about the topic, there'll be a lot of girls that can relate to me. And then I also got involved in the Kick It Out Game Changers program, where we sort of were educated on equality, diversity, and inclusion, as well as having the opportunity to speak to a lot of people within the football industry to sort of boost our potential in the sporting industry. And that was a great opportunity for me as well, to go on and learn a lot more and try and educate myself and put myself in the best position that I can be to inspire younger girls. And so my message really is that I don't want to wait around for people to solve the problems that I have, or the problems within trying to make things more diverse and more inclusive. Everyone has a role to play in that, and everyone can play a role in that. No matter how small it is, there is something that everybody can do to try and change things.
Thank you, Salma. There's so many different topics that we've discussed, and that's a really good story. I think there's so many areas I want to be able to pick up on your story there as well, which I'll come back to. So to the audience, as always, you know, get your questions in. I know there's a couple of questions coming in right now. I actually have maybe 6 or 7 questions myself. However, I'll go to the audience first, and we have Shireen here, who has asked, what are the areas of the football industry that we might not know about? So not actually playing football, that would benefit from more diverse groups of people getting involved. So it's a bit of a long question. However, just to break it down, what are the areas of football industry that we might not know about that would benefit us, benefit from more diverse groups of people getting involved? And that's an open question for all three. So if anyone wants to take it first, we can all go through that in one time in a row as well. I think Kevin's got his hand up, so I'll come to you first.
Yeah, so a good way to think about this is if you think of a football stadium on a match day, say Wembley, there'll be about 100,000 people there, and only 22 of them will be playing football. So, for example, just within the teams, you have the coaching, medical, you have logistics. In stadiums, you have marketing, catering, you have the journalists, and that's just in professional football. So, you know, the industry of professional football is pretty big. But then if you go into grassroots football, so the FA itself, for example, has 1,000 members of staff. And then if you look at county FAs, there's another 1,500 to 2,000. So that's just within the FA and county FA, that's sort of sports development. You've also got football coaches. I think there's around 50,000 active football coaches at any one time, whether they're voluntary or professional. You've got referees. There are 30,000 referees who are all paid for each match that they do. And then you've got all the other, so for example, every time you have the Euros or the World Cup or the Premier League, there are loads and loads of jobs, just like any industry that revolve around the game of football. So there's tons. There are lawyers, there are physios, there is marketing. So in any area of society, you'll have all of those jobs in football. So anything you want to do, you can probably do it in football. So that's, I guess, the key message.
Thank you, Kevin. I've got Riz asking to come next, so I'll put that on unmute.
Yeah, just follow on what Kevin's saying. What people probably don't know is every single football club has a community trust or foundation. So Brentford have their community sports trust, Fulham have their Fulham Foundation. So for me, that was my first step into football. So when I left Brentford, I went on to work for Fulham in the community back then. So, and I would tell any young person, any student, you know, wherever university you're at, find out from your local football club what they've got going in their community trust. And they're always looking for volunteers. And it's a great way in to get yourself into the club, do some grassroots coaching. And if you've got a level 1 or level 2, that's a great place to start your coaching career. And that's where I started off, you know, and that's where I've sort of progressed my career. And I know a lot of young people, you know, CEOs, that's where they started. And even if you're a good footballer, you know, male or female, play. They've got kick sessions, they've got evening sessions, they've got disability sessions, education. So a lot of clubs do a lot of great work around education as well. So yeah, if you don't know that, I think that's a good place to start as well.
That's definitely a really good point. And just to highlight as well, it's not just football clubs. It could be any other sports clubs that offer the whole package as well. And that's really worth considering for a lot of people. Salma, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I'm just going to highlight coaching again. There's many opportunities within coaching. You can volunteer even before you get involved in one, just to get a taste of everything. Oh.
Sorry, there's a bit of a... If you try again now.
Can you hear me all right now?
It's better now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so there's honestly so many opportunities. Looking at local clubs as well as community sports trusts, as Riz mentioned. You don't have to be a professional to get involved. Like everyone starts off as a beginner. Everyone has to start somewhere, but there's lots of different ways to get involved.
And what's the easiest way? If someone right now wanted to sort of, you know, they've been thinking about it for a long time. I want to do something passionate. I want to do something with my time after work. What can I do right now just to, you know, just pick up the phone, or is it how do I get easily get involved? Sorry, I saw Kevin's finger go. I'll still come to you after Riz.
Yeah, I think probably just contact wherever your local club or community trust is, and just contact them and ask them. If volunteering is usually the best way into football anyway. If you want to work in football, most people start off volunteering in some way, and then once they got that experience, work their way in. Go, Riz.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kev, that a lot of clubs they're all on social media as well. So the club is on social media, so is the community trust as well. So you can always drop them a message on that. But for any young person, the first thing is making the first step, because no one's going to give you anything in life. I think it's important that we encourage youngsters to be proactive, and like Kev said, getting in touch. So yeah, I think in terms of websites or social media, clubs are really accessible and they're crying out for people to get involved, especially in the community. They're looking for volunteers. They offer you safeguarding training. They'll actually sometimes pay for your coaching qualifications as well, because there's so much funding available to clubs to ensure they're engaging people from all backgrounds, all ethnicities and cultures.
Just to add to that, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
I think there's also a lot to be said just for volunteering generally. So what a lot of, especially parents, don't realise about their children volunteering to coach or to referee, for example, you get lots of really good life skills from doing that. Just the experience of, especially refereeing, you learn a lot about communicating with people that can really help you when you're trying to move into a career and to develop in later life.
Absolutely, and that's actually a really good point, which I wanted to raise on what Riz mentioned earlier as well, about embracing the players, listening to their stories, understanding where they're coming from and what's important to them, but also understanding the parents' perspective too. And there's also a point someone raised earlier about, for me, especially growing up as well, there was, I think someone mentioned this, it was a balance of, having to go to school, balance your A-levels with having to sort of, be good at sports. And in school, I don't know if everyone else felt this as well, but there was always a group of people who are super good at sports, but not necessarily that good at work, at sort of educate the grades and stuff. But then there's the other side of people who spent a lot of time studying and not enough in sports. And then you had one or two like really good hybrids who were just good at everything, and you just couldn't compete against them. And I really enjoyed sports side. I just always wanted to be able to play sports, different types of sports and stuff. But it was also the pressures of, your parents or anyone else sort of coming down and saying, look, you're wasting too much time. And that connotation of wasting your time, I think is completely wrong. That shift needs to happen also in the mindsets of our parents and as we grow up as well, that actually there's probably a lot more you can learn from by getting involved with sports, with getting involved with community work, with volunteering and all that sort of stuff as well. And I think that's the next question I want to sort of ask and sort of directed to Salma first as well. But you mentioned a lot about, growing up and it was difficult. How difficult was it? And what was it really like? And how did you convince those, how did you change those problems into solutions? And how did you have sort of the determination to sort of, pull out through it from it as well?
Growing up for me, trying to play football, it was extremely difficult from my parents' perspective. They were not having it. They didn't want me to play. And I sort of started out in primary school, so it was in year 6. And at the time, my parents didn't really mind because it was just another sports club that I was involved with at school. I was involved in a lot of sports clubs and my parents just thought it was, just school. So they didn't think anything of it. It was only when I went into year 7 and I decided to join a team outside of school, that was when things started getting a bit difficult, and my parents started, making their opinion quite clear. They didn't want me to play football. They didn't want me involved in it at all. And I really wanted to play, so I sort of didn't listen to it. And it got to a point where I was having to pretend I was going to the library or pretend I was going to my friend's house, and I'd have my kit in my bag, and I'd get to training, and then I'd go to the toilets and get changed and start playing that way. And then when I had to pay fees for joining a team, obviously because I didn't have my parents' support, there was no way I could afford that amount of money. And when my coach said to me, all right, Salma, like, how have you found it? I was like, oh yeah, it's been really good. He was like, all right then, do you want to sign up and join? And then he mentioned the fees, and at that point I was like, oh, you know what, actually, I'll think about it maybe next season. And so he sort of spoke to me and figured out obviously that my parents weren't on board and didn't support me. So he managed to find a way for me to play that season without having to pay the fees, which I was extremely grateful for. And had it not been for him, I don't even know if I would still be involved in football. So he played a massive role in that. And then as I grew up, me and my parents clashed a lot in terms of that, but I just had to make sure that I wasn't slipping up school-wise. I was doing everything I could. I was on my best behavior, not getting into trouble at school or anything like that. And then as I sort of progressed and they started to see the benefits football was having on my life, and seeing me progress onto sixth form and doing my A-levels and then going on to uni as well, then they started to see that, okay, you know, she's able to balance it. She's still continuing on with her education, so that's not a problem anymore. And then they started to see that, you know, I'm still playing with my headscarf. I'm covering up, so religiously it's not a problem either. And I was quite stubborn as well. I kept going no matter how much they said that I couldn't play, and so it got to a point where they had to accept it because I was going to be doing it anyways. And yeah, so then now they're very, very, very supportive, and my parents always come to see me speak whenever I'm at events and stuff, and they're really supportive of everything I'm doing at the moment.
And we're glad for it as well. And to hear that story, you know, I'm sure there's many other people that probably felt the same way, probably weren't as resilient and didn't have the opportunity sort of just to push through. And I wanted to mention Zidane Iqbal, I think, was another person that came up recently, who's I think the first Pakistani footballer to really break it into the Premier League. So he's signed by Manchester United, I think 17 years old only. And there's, I think, many of the examples that have sort of gone out as well. Another one was, and it's not just Muslim, it's the I have it here actually, I was looking at it earlier, but in the referees. So for the referees in the championship, recently I read the championship history to be made by British South Asian referees, Bups and Sunny Singh. They were the recent ones. I think they follow their dad's path of sort of champion of refereeing, and again, to see that in, you know, just diversity in terms of not only the sports but also refereeing and getting involved with other things is really good to see. Before I move to the next question, was there anything else you wanted to add to, sorry, Kevin or Riz as well? It's Kevin, 1 second, let me just unmute you.
Yeah, I mean, first thing, I think Riz, I'm sure will agree, the first Pakistani player to do really well was his brother. Was back in the sort of 80s, 90s, first to play in all 4 divisions. So that was one. But you're right, there are, so Bups and Sonny Gill and Zidane, there are players and referees, you know, so there are role models out there, but just the numbers are so low that they're nowhere near what they should be. You know, looking at the interest and the amount of people from Muslim and Asian background who play football, there should be much better representation in the pro game. And as Salma was saying, I think a lot of parents, especially first, second generation parents, probably have a perception of football that it is fun, but don't realise the real benefits their children can get out of it. I don't think our education system here is set up for people to achieve in sport. If you look at America's uni system, you can achieve in sport and academically. But here, if you want to go to uni, you've got to choose one or the other. It's a little bit old school. And a lot of schools are either very academic or very sporty. And it's quite difficult, unless you get to some schools, to get a good experience of both. Sadly, I was one of those people who played a lot of sport but didn't study probably as much as I could have. Whereas a lot of children nowadays are doing a lot of academics because there's a lot more pressure on them, which means they have less time for sport. But I don't know if Riz has got any thoughts as well.
Yeah, Kev, Zesh played in the 2000s, not 80s. He's only 37.
Is he? Sorry.
I ain't that old. But yeah, Adnan, you're right though. Listen, there's a growing, if we're talking about Muslim players, I'm seeing it already. I'm in conversation with a lot of young Muslim players in the academy system. The academy is diverse. I think parents now are a bit different. You know, we love the sport, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call will echo that as well. And there's no excuses now for a young person, regardless of your background, to blame racism or, you know, no opportunity, the clubs are racist. I think that's out of the question now. If you're good enough, the clubs don't care your background, they don't care where you're from. If you're good enough, you're going to come through. And what I'm sort of seeing is, what we don't have is at the moment is the networks. When a young British Muslim player joins an academy system at the moment, they don't have the networks in the game how to navigate it. So that's the kind of work we're doing now, is building that trust with them, linking them to other players. So when they do come into the system, they feel welcomed. You know, the clubs know that they're Muslims. The club know how to accommodate them, and we're already seeing the benefits of that as well. So yes, it's not as what it should be right now, but I'm quite positive the next 5, 10, 15 years that was changed slowly but surely.
Absolutely, and we love to see it as fans as well. Like, we love to see that sort of diversity is happening all over the place in the private sector and stuff. Why shouldn't you see it on the sports, on screens, be able to embrace that? And I know it'd go down really well as well. So moving forward, then we have a question actually from the audience, and I'm just going to bring Shabana on the screen now. Shabana, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you firstly to all three speakers, and thank you for sharing your stories and for your time. What I wanted to ask was, for me, my older brother grew up playing football, and he was good enough to turn pro, and he signed to a local club. But a big issue for him was the racism that he got at the grassroots level. And I grew up in inner city Manchester, and I'm talking 30 years ago, so he's in his 40s now. And at the time, he had so much support from the club, and all the coaches were rallying around him because he was definitely good enough to turn pro. But ultimately, the racism that he got from fellow footballers, who are obviously young lads, and if he's the only Pakistani Muslim boy in the club, and also my parents' lack of education awareness, and they were sort of it's his choice to step back. They don't know how to support him either. For me, it was more just, what do you think can be done to challenge racism more at grassroots level and generally throughout the sport? And do you think enough is being done?
I'm muted. Thank you, Shabana. Who wants to take that first? Kevin,
Sure.
Go for it. Yeah,
I mean, I'll take this because obviously I worked at the FA for 8 years, and at Kick It Out. You're right, it's a big issue. It's the issue for football is whether it's leading or it's lagging behind society. So football's the biggest sport. Over 10 million people play it. So whatever happens in society is going to be reflected in football. So when society is more divided after something like Brexit, and Boris Johnson being Prime Minister, that's going to be reflected in football. And the challenge to football is to try and lead society and to be a role model, so that if we deal with it well, then society might follow. So the one thing that can be done is reporting. So there are lots of good processes in football. So county FAs have disciplinary processes. They have tribunals or panels of trained people who receive diversity training. They have a system whereby you have chairs who are diverse people. So in the old days, you get 3 70-year-old men who had no idea of diversity looking at cases, and now you have diverse people from inclusion groups dealing with those cases. But the issue, probably like in society, is that a very low number of people report things. People either don't know how to report things, or they might not have confidence in the system. And that's one of the things that Kick It Out is trying to raise awareness of. It's trying to encourage people to report and telling them what the processes are. You can't expect people to report something if they don't know where to do it. And once that happens, usually the process is pretty good. There's been a lot more effort from the FA and the county FAs, and probably 90% of cases are dealt with really well, maybe higher. But the issue is that a very small number of people report complaints, in the same way that probably a small number of people report a lot of crimes around discrimination. A lot of people will think, well, nothing will be done about it. Why am I wasting my time telling the police or telling anyone else? So I think we need to make more efforts to make people more confident in the system is probably the biggest thing.
Thank you, Kevin. Riz?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to hear about your brother. And, you know, growing up, and I experienced racism at the grassroots when I was, you know, 7, 8, you get called a packy. And sometimes I think people say trying to put you off. But I don't think now, you know, we should, yes, and it is still there at the grassroots, and that's not denied. But like Kev said, you know, I chair the Surrey FA's IAG, and I know that the reporting systems are robust, and we are getting more and more people reporting any sort of hate crime or racism, which is what we want to see as well. But as parents, what we don't want to be doing is deterring our kids away from the grassroots, because you've got to start somewhere. Now, when I work with young players now and their family, I'll tell them, look, likelihood is you will receive, be a victim of racism in football or, you know, some way along your career, but this is how you sort of deal with it. This is how you report it, but don't let that sort of stop you from following your dream or playing sport. And I think we've got to be mindful of, it's important we learn from, you know, these stories and share our experiences, but at the same time, you know, we need more diversity at the grassroots, because that's ultimately where it starts. When I worked for Fulham as a foundation coach back in, when I was 20 at university, I was the only Asian coach working there in Surrey with 20, 25, 30 kids from white backgrounds. That didn't stop me. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to prove that I could coach. I want to prove that I could inspire others. And that's what we've sort of done in our work. And I think that's the message. Yes, racism is there, but we still need to ensure that we're out there, that we're volunteering, and that we're breaking those barriers down to make it easier for the next generation of people coming through.
Absolutely. Amazing. Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question as well, Shabana. We actually have a couple more questions as well, and I'm sort of conscious of time as well. But I want to ask one from myself as well, and it's 2 parts, but the first one is more about, granted, Brentford's doing a lot of good work. Using that as an example, how can other clubs and possibly even other industries learn from that, and what can they really implement going forward with that? And the second part of the question is, how can we use our voice for change here as well? What can we practically do? And that one's more specific towards Salma first. I'll come to you, Salma, for the second part. Actually both, but more specifically the second one as well. I'm just going to unmute you now.
Yeah, so in terms of what other clubs can do, I think just take, what's the word? Just sort of see what clubs are doing and see that other clubs can do it too, if that makes sense. Like, there is things that can be done, and there's the time for waiting around and waiting for other people to do it is over. Everyone's got to get involved now, and everyone's got to do their bit. In terms of what people can do to use their voice to try and implement change, there's a lot of different opportunities. So I myself try and get involved in as many programs as I can, as many programs to listen to other people speak, but also to get my voice heard as well. I know that I'm young, and I know that I don't have all the knowledge, but I do know that I have an opinion, and I have my experiences, and I can use my experiences to try and empower and inspire others. So it's one of the main things is a lot of people know what they need to do. They're just too afraid to take that first step. And I think the first step is the most important step. There will be times where you're going to feel like you don't have as much knowledge as other people. Imposter syndrome is definitely a thing, but you've just got to push that to the side and really go out there. And one of the things I like to do, and I try to do a lot, is to just think about my younger self and what my younger self would tell me. Because when I was younger, I always said to myself, when I grow up, you know, I'm gonna make a change, and I don't want, you know, my little sister to have to experience it. I don't want my children and my grandchildren to have to experience the same thing. And so if I can do something about it, then I'm gonna do it. Yeah, it's just remembering that there's more good that will come out of it, if that makes sense. Like, it will be difficult, yes, but there's a lot more good that will come out of it. so it's all worth it. And also try and engage with other people, because there's a wide network and a lot of people who are like you. And I know when I was younger, it was hard because I was young, I wasn't on social media, but now there's social media and there's a lot more people, a lot more Muslim females that I can connect with on things like Twitter. There's a lot of people who will support you, a lot of people who are in the same position as you. And so getting involved in those networks and creating communities and ties with people who can support you when you're feeling low, and also get you involved in different programs and opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just reminds me of the time when I was younger, and I used to feel, I wouldn't say ashamed, but I felt awkward just opening my fast during Ramadan, or if I was playing sports and people were like, why are you not drinking water? And just didn't feel like you could just tell them like, oh, I'm fasting, I don't drink. And I don't know why that was the case. Like if I think back now, that's such a silly excuse, but it was definitely there back then. And you know, now that you see, there's a clip of a Turkish team, and they were showing that on the TV about them opening the fast and drinking the water and stuff. Again, normalize that. Like it's easy to do that. Show what it's about. People like Mohamed Salah and Paul Pogba have come up and sort of, you know, embraced it and sort of demonstrated to their fan base as well that this is who we are, this is what we're about, and this is what we value. And slowly but surely, I think that those are sort of breaking barriers as well. Riz, I'll come to you next, and then Kevin final after that.
Yeah, I think for me, the conversation needs to be more regular, because normally we in football we only talk about Ramadan once a year. There's no conversation around Muslim players year in, year out. You know, I think a lot of people in football will come out and talk about Ramadan, but we need to remember that that's just one part of that's just one of the pillars. So I've been guilty of it myself, and I've realized me as a person as well. You know, I need to ensure that I'm talking about the Salah or talking about the pilgrimage or whatever it is. You know, we can't be afraid to talk about or express who we are. And I think sometimes we do that. We're guilty of it as well. And I just feel that to keep the conversation moving, it's important that we talk to our colleagues, our teammates, our friends about who we are, what we do, and welcome them into your households. Let them know how you live your life, you know, your behaviors. And I think that's the key as well, is, you know, our behaviors really define us. And I think as Muslims, you know, it's important that, you know, we practice what we preach as well. So for me, it's keeping that conversation going and really being proud of you know, who we are and where we're from as well.
Great words. And Kevin, to you.
Yeah, fine. I mean, you said what are we doing at the club at Brentford in order to try and lead the way to encourage others. I mean, for example, today we have a day of fasting we've encouraged all of our staff, Muslim and non-Muslim, and we're about to have Iftar here at the club tonight. And we're looking at trying to be the most inclusive club in the country. And to do that, we've just got to do the right thing across the board. So, you know, in the past, a lot of players have worn T-shirts and spoken out about racism, but it's across the board. You know, why is there no female coaches in football? There's never been a single female coach in professional football. We've got an ambition to make our staff reflect the boroughs and the locality of our local community. So we've got a really inclusive recruitment process now, from our board all the way through our staff, looking at data, looking at trying to engage with local communities to come and work at the club. You know, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So we want our communities to look at the club and see a reflection of themselves. And we're trying to implement inclusion across every aspect of the club, on the field, off the field, in the stadium. So I think the best thing you can do around inclusion is to be a role model yourself, and try and impart every aspect of inclusion in whatever you do.
Excellent. That's really great. I'm just conscious of time. I think we've got a couple of minutes left only. So on that, I'd like to conclude. I know there's a couple more questions as well. However, we are running out of time. So I want to thank all our guest speakers today. Just before that, I know Sam is here as well from Brentford, and she had a little bit of a story to share. I just want to give you maybe 30 seconds, just quickly, just if you can share. Just going to ask you to unmute, if you can.
Yeah, thank you. It was just to say, anybody that has any aspiration of working within any industry, really, but my story is that, you know, 20 years ago, I'm in HR, by the way, human resources, and 20 years ago, I saw a job at the FA and thought, no, I'm not experienced enough, I can't do it. I went into lots of different types of industries. 20 years later, I did it. And people said to me, you must be very idealistic. or you've given up on kind of ambition and career and for your career, and that's not the case. I just wanted to work in an industry I love, and it's everything I could have hoped for. We've had a bit of a roller coaster for 2 seasons, so hopefully it'll calm down at some point. But my point is, if it's confidence and just take that step, and if you want to work in an industry in any sport, go for it. You'll get there.
Amazing. And for sure, I mean, if you can share your details as well with people, this is the best way. This is the whole point of Ramadan Tent Project, to bring people together, to network, to get to know one another's stories. We've probably got 30 seconds left, so I want to say thank you to all our speakers, to Riz, to Kevin, to Salma and Sam as well for joining us, and to all our audience here as well on Zoom, but also on the Islam channel as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. The Azan is literally maybe 10 seconds away. So we'll just take the next 10 seconds just to pause and reflect. Thank you very much, everyone.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت، ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
And that is the finale of the show today, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I just want to say thank you to Kevin Coleman, Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. Thank you to Salma Mahamud, Brentford Women's Development Team. And thank you to Riz Rehman as well from the FBA. We really enjoyed that. And I think everyone involved as well with this really get in touch and love the stories. A lot of messages have come through and they've been inspired. We've also got information. We've got emails from Kevin and Sam as well. So for those that are interested, and we definitely encourage everyone to, you know, if you're ever thinking about getting involved in any way whatsoever, either with RTP or with anyone else we've hosted, Brentford Football Club over here as well, please do so. We can share the information afterwards as well. And I think last but not least, thank you to everyone who's joined. I know I can see a couple of familiar faces here as well from all over the world. We had people from Sweden, we had people from Australia, and we've got our sponsors as well, Islam Channel, and the guests we have over there as well. We'd also like to thank Arts Council UK for helping sponsor us this year. And I know this wouldn't be possible without them. The final one, and as always as well, is follow us on social media. Open Iftar and Ramadan Tent Project as well. Share your stories, share experiences. We love to see that sort of stuff. We have a couple more other things online as well. Visit our websites. You can collect one of the packs, the My Open Iftar pack. I recently saw Freddie Knute. He came back again. We hosted him last year. Freddie, if you're watching, we're loving to have you back this year as well, inshallah, if we can. But yeah, get your packs online, and which does go to is a donation towards charity. And we also have the Ramadan Lates as well. You can find all the information online. From me, that's everything. I've been your host today, Adnan Shakur, and if you have anything else you want to get involved with, simple story for me as well. I literally just messaged someone on RTP when I was interested on Instagram, and I got involved. It's very simple like that. If anyone else wants to get involved, definitely get in touch. That's all from me. Thank you, everyone. See you again tomorrow.